People have always thought I'm an extrovert, and I can see why. I can be quite chatty, I've never struggled to make friends, and at times I've been pretty out there. I used to be into theatre and stage acting, and I've been seen out in public in a whole manner of costumes. Corpse, flapper girl, corn on the cob. And hey, here I am on YouTube, because for some weird reason, despite lots of insecurities, I've never been fazed by public speaking. So yeah, of course I'm an extrovert, surely. I remember once in my 20s having a chat with John, my partner at the time, and he was a fairly shy, quiet person, and we were talking about our personality differences, and I was saying how obviously he was an introvert and I was an extrovert, and he said, yeah, but you're not though. And it stopped me in my tracks. And I looked at him puzzled and went through all the things I've just mentioned, you know, being chatty, sociable, all the rest of it. And he said, yeah, but I see what it does to you. I thought I'd fooled him along with the rest of the world, but he saw right through the mask. See, he'd always described me as outgoing. He specifically used that word, but he always saw me after socialising. How I'd come home, get straight into my pyjamas and collapse. I used to take acting classes, and there was this one tutor who always talked about keeping the balls in the air. Now obviously that's a juggling metaphor, but it's about how all performers have a responsibility to keep the energy up. And not just up, but equal. So a group of performers have a duty to support each other. No one dominating and no one standing there like a piece of furniture. And it was only years later I realised that's how I'd always approach social situations. So in a group of dynamic people, I felt I had to keep up, and in a group of quieter people, I somehow felt responsible for lifting the room. But either way, I'd come home drained and looking forward to spending the next few days at home in my comfy clothes. And I think that's the thing no one really talks about, is that you can be very good at performing extroversion, but that performance has a cost. And there was something else I noticed around that time in my 20s too, which is that I hardly ever had the flat to myself, because my partner was always there at home, and that started bothering me because I never got the alone time I needed. So when that relationship eventually ended, I moved out and rented an apartment on my own, and living alone was truly one of the happiest phases of my life. Coming home to my own space, accountable to no one, and able to be as sociable or as hermit-like as I wanted. And every so often I'd go off radar, so I'd buy a month-long pass at my local yoga studio and tell my friends I'd be pupating for a while, an essential step to restore my energy before I could face another round of being a social butterfly. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong with me for needing that recovery time. I assumed everyone else managed to be social without the exhaustion. It was also around that time that Susan Cain's book Quiet came out, and suddenly social media was full of conversations about what it really meant to be an introvert. And that's when everything clicked. Introverts weren't necessarily shy or socially anxious, but feeling drained after socialising, needing alone time, preferring small groups to large crowds. Those are all classic hallmarks of the introvert. And that was me. That had always been me. And I realised I hadn't just been performing extroversion, I'd actually been overcompensating for not being one, as if introversion was some kind of deficit I needed to make up for. So yeah, to anyone who knew me back then, if ever I came off as a little bit obnoxious, that's what was going on. Sorry about that. And some people have asked in the comments if I'm a highly sensitive person or even on the autistic spectrum, and I can kind of see why. There's definitely some overlap, but the reality is I'm just an FSP, a fairly sensitive person, and a bit of an introvert, which just means I need more quiet time. And I'm finding the older I get, the more of that I need. By the way, if you're curious about that Susan Cain book, Shortform has a brilliant summary that breaks down the key insights. And there's lots of other great non-fiction books on there too. So scan the code or click the link below to enjoy a free trial and a discount. Then lockdown happened, and I was living alone in Malaysia. And while everyone else was climbing the walls, desperate for human contact, I was fine. More than fine. I made friends with the pigeons nesting on my window ledge, and after 18 months, I became something of a pigeon fancier. Not something that was ever on my bucket list, but life's full of surprises. And eventually I had to admit that even I was going a bit stir crazy, but it was the separation from people I really cared about that bothered me, not the lack of socialising generally. Not once did I crave company just for the sake of it. And realising that led to a whole reassessment of how I wanted to live, hence hermiting in rural Ireland. So what actually changed when I stopped performing? Well, I gradually stopped feeling guilty for saying no, and I stopped making excuses. I just lean into being something of a social recluse. And when I do socialise, I no longer assume sole responsibility for making the occasion a fun or entertaining experience for everyone. And if there's an awkward silence, I let it be awkward. If the energy dips, I let it dip. I mean, hopefully I've not turned into a complete monster, and I do enjoy a certain amount of human interaction. But the point is, I no longer rush to perform or to rescue people from their social discomfort. So I'm really interested to know if there's anyone else who relates to this. Let me know in the comments. Or maybe you know someone who seems very sociable and then disappears for days, or you see them collapse as soon as they get home. Maybe you thought they were being rude or feeling depressed, but it's quite possible they're just an introvert who's exhausted from performing a social role, even if they enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to hit like and consider subscribing if you haven't already. As always, thank you very much for watching, take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.